Shalom, shalom. Welcome to the upper room.
Shalom.
My name's Darren. I'll be your host. If you're new around here, this is an area in which we can get into biblical topics. We can loose and bind scripture, and that we can, dive deep in the areas in which we find ourselves following our Messiah, Yeshua. If you've not already, head over to the Almond House YouTube channel, where we go through from Genesis to Revelation, and we find Yeshua on every page. That's where you'll find your teachings, your edification, and all of the good stuff there. In the meantime, if you haven't already, like, subscribe, share, do all that good stuff for us. That would be greatly appreciated. But in the meantime, I'm joined by my lovely guest, Emma. Shalom.
Shalom.
Now, today's subject, again, it's not a new subject. It's a very deep and nuanced subject in the sense that there's many different perspectives, and there's I'm just going to concede defeat on this already because we can't possibly cover all of the areas within one conversation. God willing, we can cover different perspectives with regards to all of the areas. But in the meantime, I'm just going to start with this scripture. It's Proverbs 22:6. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. So we're going to be looking at the topic of homeschooling. And with Emma, we're going to be looking at it from the perspective of somebody who has been homeschooled and all of the experiences, positive and negative, with regards to that. So, shalom, Emma. Welcome to the upper room.
Shalom, Darren.
It's great to have you. I think it's fair to say you haven't come directly from the States just for the podcast. But it's great to have you here, and I really look forward to getting into it with you. So, if you could just kick off with maybe just a little bit about your background, where you're from, what your family life looks like, and just a backdrop in terms of your experience with homeschooling.
Sure. Yeah, so I'm from southern Indiana, and I've grown up with my family. I have an older sister, and I have two older brothers. And my sister actually began public school. She went to kindergarten, but that was it. And after that, my mom just decided, no, I want to pull the kids, and I want to just do it myself. So she had two more boys and then me, and she just homeschooled us all the way, almost all the way, but we can get into that later. That's awesome.
Yeah. So your sister was the first. She's the eldest, and she was the first one to.
Yeah.
She was the guinea pig, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. And so she'd already had some experience within public school, and then pulled the plug, and then.
Yes.
With regards to that, so obviously we're going to be tackling this from a biblical perspective. In terms of as believers, does that change our attitudes and our opinions with regards to how we school our children? So, are you aware, or do you know, was there a biblical backdrop to the reasoning behind the pulling of the children, or is it something your mum wanted to own a bit more, or was it just it's just something that she felt like she wanted to do?
Yeah, I think it was a mix of things. I think primarily she was concerned with us just having an education that was in accordance with the Word of God. And, when you homeschool your own kids, you just, know where they're at. You don't have to worry about any agendas or, materials that are pointing away from God if you're just doing it yourself. So I think mainly Mom was concerned with giving us a good biblical education. But I think part of it was just also her wanting to make the most of our time and just enjoying being with us, because she was in the position that we could do that financially. Yeah. Not everybody can afford to homeschool, frankly. So since we were in the position that we could, she just wanted that time with us as well. So a mix, yeah.
Okay, cool. You've already mentioned quite a few variables to a background in terms of whys and wherefores and how you can homeschool. Now, I think it's important to illustrate the heart of this conversation in terms of how this ties into previous conversations we've had within the show and the podcast in terms of vision. So I think when we're looking at the vision for a married biblical life, a family in accordance to Yah's ways, I think the more information we can get in terms of what that vision looks like, what success looks like, it is great because it can enable and build and encourage others to know what's involved and to have something to aspire to. So with that being said, that vision I think is really important for aspiring couples. So what are your expectations in terms of what you would do with your children? Would you be prepared to let them go into public school? Do you have homeschooling aspirations? If it is the latter, then what do we need to do in terms of creating a foundation to make that happen? You know, what's the financial implications? What does the day-to-day look like? Who's going to be doing the teaching? So I think the logistics and the pragmatic approach to what that looks like is a really important element. So with that being said, what was the day-to-day like? Who did the teaching and was there did you have like a curriculum to follow? Did you have like lessons, or was it more on the fly? Like just tell me about your experience with that, really.
Yeah, sure. So just kind of an overview of how it looked for us was that my mom did the teaching. I think this is different for different families. You know, sometimes the mom does it. I've seen families where the dad actually does it and the mom works, or even grandparents do the teaching. So, I mean, there's lots of different ways to do it. For us, it was my mom teaching us. And yeah, we each had our little desk, we each had our books, and I guess mainly for curriculum, we used a curriculum called Bob Jones University. And I would highly recommend that for anybody that's looking for homeschooling material, because it just covers all kinds of subjects, all kinds of grade levels. So we used a lot of that. We mixed it with other materials too. It just depends on, what's best for the child, what's good for the year, for the subject, sometimes even the single concept. So a mix of materials. We each had our little. Is this kind of what you were asking about?
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, this is bang on, literally the details, because in my head I'm already thinking, right, so you've obviously been you're born into this as such, you don't know any different.
Yeah.
But in my head I'm thinking, right, so I'm waking out of bed and is it I'm going to school now, and then I just walk into the living room. So do you know what I mean? And that holistic approach to family, it's there's no change, there's no difference between your family life and your education.
Yeah.
So all those details are really cool to know.
So if you really want the details, for us it was we'd get up in the morning about 7 o'clock. We'd have a half hour to kind of wake up and watch the news and whatever, just kind of wake up and get ready for the day. We'd go feed the animals. So we had chores and things. And then we'd usually start with a Bible study, which was great. I think that was, looking back, that was really special to me. So just the four of us and my mom, we would do a little Bible study. And then we'd get started from 8 all the way till 3:30 was usually how long our day lasted. We each had a little schedule book with 7 or 8 subjects to cover each day. And when we were younger, obviously my mom would schedule that for us for the week. But as we got older, we kind of learned to schedule ourselves, which I think is a really cool perk about homeschooling is if it's done right, you really learn to be independent and organize and, a lot of self-regulated learning skills in it. So yeah, we would just go through those subjects each day. And then, yeah, that was pretty much just what a day looked like. And in the evenings, we would just we wouldn't have any homework, right? You know, like mom's not going to send me home with homework at home. So
that's a massive perk. I'll take that any day. Yeah.
At the end of the day, we just have time to like go outside and play with each other or play with the neighbors, church friends, or whoever. And I think that's another really big advantage to homeschooling is like, because you don't spend every evening doing homework and things like that, you have a lot of like family time and just to explore your own interests and things like that. So that's like an overall view of what homeschooling would look like for us.
Okay, cool. So with regards to, just take like the subjects, for example, was it a case where like, I mean, this is why I'm saying like this is a really like deep and nuanced conversation because you can just keep going and going. So for example, with your mum, she set the subjects initially. So was it a case where she was like, say for example, like, I don't know, I'm terrible at maths and like I need to work on maths, but I'm maybe, I don't know. The question is, what were the subjects? Was it like you were doing all the normal subjects that you're doing within like a school environment? So you got your 3 R's, your reading, your writing, your arithmetic, and then geography and all the rest of it. Yeah. Did you start off with that, and then was it like you say it was whittled down in terms of your skills and preference?
I wouldn't say we really. So like at the beginning, it was just like all the regular subjects. We had like spelling, we had some word work, we had writing, reading, math, science, history. We did music, and then we had like 30 minutes of free reading every day where we would just like fly through chapter books that like were of our own interest that we chose. So that's like what it looked like for all those beginning years. When we got older, we didn't really narrow in on any particular interests, but I think that is an advantage to homeschooling should a child take interest in something. We didn't do that, but you could if you were like interested in science particularly or math particularly or like technology or whatever, like you could, that would be a good thing about homeschooling is that you could go ahead and get started on like really focusing in on those skills and, maybe develop that into a career. For us personally, we didn't do that. We just kind of went through the regular like high school years. For us, it's high school, but
right. So with that, you've got from my knowledge of American high school is probably based on like TV shows and movies. So how accurate it is like up for debate. But I presume it's like you've got that graduation like process. You graduate each year, is that right?
Yeah.
Into the next grade. And then obviously depending on your performance and your grades will dictate. Right. So did you still have that premise to what you were doing each year, or was it just like your mum's like, well, you passed, like you're flying colours, or do you know what I mean? Was there like say for example, you're in a secular school and you go through the grade process and you're aiming to go to college and whatever, was that still like the framework, or was it just literally like as you went each year you switched it up?
When you have like when you're working with a curriculum, you still have quizzes and you still have tests and things like that. So there's still, just like in regular school, you would just go through the assessments and things like that. If you misunderstood some things or you need to work on certain areas, like you can still work on those skills before moving on. So yeah, I think I don't know a lot about this, but like in different states, some states require like proof of kids like passing or what they're being taught and things like that. For my state, particularly Indiana, we didn't have to like prove anything that we were passing certain things or anything. Like we just did homeschooling, and then I went straight into college, and I believe I had to test into like for them to place me in a math course and things like that to get started in college, because I didn't have like an SAT score or some kind of record for them to look at. But yeah, I mean, you just still progress the way you would in secular school.
Okay, that's cool. And I think it's important to note at this point, as you mentioned there, about how it differs from state to state. Now, obviously, we're speaking about your experience in particular, but again, it's important to say that this is going to vary from state to state, from country to country, in terms of legislation. So this is not, the be all and end all of how the format works. Again, within the upper room, we always advocate research and searching things out for yourselves. And because it may be different depending on what jurisdictions, what the legislation is. Yeah. And also, it's really important to reiterate that there are many different motivations for doing this and pursuing it. It could be for religious reasons. It could be for any multitude of reasons. And again, I think it's important because it's easy to. We'll just get right into it. I think it's easy to say that there's an agenda or a satanic programming that's prevalent in secular schools, which again that's a long debate and conversation in itself. But aside from that, as believers, I think it's important that we're not operating from a spirit of fear, that we're operating from the tools and the resources that the Lord's given us. And I think that's really important, that we should focus on those things. Of course, we can get into the agendas and the programming that's there, because it's prevalent, and particularly in this generation, it's a really important conversation to have. Now, with that being said, if I just rewind a little bit, did your mum have any teaching experience prior to going into this, or was she just like straight in there?
She just jumped right in. Straight
in. Wow. Okay. So she had no experience. She was obviously led to do this, and she found her way. So there's hope for us. Like I said, I'm useless at maths, so there's no way I'm going to be teaching any child maths, because that is not going to go down well. But okay, with that being said, if you could just give us a bit of background in terms of like, what was your home setup? Because is it like a full homestead, or is it just like a farmy environment you were in?
We had some animals just for fun, not like farming for an income or anything like that, just like a hobby farm, I guess. We had some animals to keep, but yeah, that's all.
Okay, so because again, if you look at the statistics with regards to homeschooling, it's like a 50-50 split in terms of there's city folks doing it, there's rural folks doing it. There is quite a wide demographic in terms of the people that are heading towards it. Now, again, statistically, there is an increase in terms of homeschooling, particularly with the Rona over the last couple of years. People are just, finding themselves in that situation. So there is an increase, generally speaking. But as I said, I think as a body, it's important that we don't run to that option in a panic because of things that are taking precedent in schools. So, okay. What did you find in terms of like the balance, like as a kid growing up? How were you able to integrate with other children, like in your community, whether it's like the church or whether it's just the other kids? Because again, I think in my head, I consider this element of being sheltered and then being let out into the big bad world, and you're like, oh crikey, what's going on? You know what I mean? So, how was that experience for you?
Yeah, it's definitely an important thing to consider if you're going to homeschool kids, because obviously we do need social interaction. And if you're at home all day, you can have your siblings, but you're not going to get the same social interaction that you would if you're going to school. So for us, we had a church, so mainly our social group was our church friends. But outside of that, we had a weekly Bible study we went to where we knew some other children. We also had neighbors nearby, just in the country area we lived in. We'd spend a lot of time with them. And then, of course, we were in 4-H club. And so we had friends there, and we had music lessons. So we had a few things going on outside of that, which I think is really important. If you're, like I said, if you're going to homeschool, you need to make sure your kids have some social experiences, because, yeah.
Now, with regards to your family and social experiences, if you would have left me and my brother at home for an extended period of time, then all hell's going to be breaking loose, for want of a better description. But for yourselves, how does it impact? We spoke about, touched on the holistic approach to family and education. How do you feel that approached your family as a unit, and the cohesion and that kind of that stuff? Because I was raised in pretty much the opposite, completely secular, single parent household. So that seems really far removed from me, but I would aspire to be a part of that, looking forward. So how did that impact your family, and how do other people see that when they see you guys together?
Yeah. I think homeschooling made all the difference for me and my family, because if you look at like your regular children going to secular school, they spend a lot of their time in the week with not their family. They're with other children all day. They're with their teacher all day. And then who knows what they've got going on in the evening where they're also not with their family, extracurricular activities and things like that. And so I generally find that between those families and homeschooling families, the siblings are a lot closer. The families are just a lot closer in general, at least from what I've seen. I can't generalize everybody,
Yeah, I wouldn't for a second say that you're the definitive authority on all things homeschooling in America, but you're the closest thing I got, so we'll go with that.
Yeah, but I think homeschooling really did help us stay tight as a family. Just share, like doing the Bible study in the morning, just going through the learning process with each other, spending the evenings together. So yeah, even today, my siblings and I, we're all adults now, but we're like super close, and I really do credit it to the homeschooling situation. Just because we've gone through it together, and so we just have a really tight bond to this day.
I love that. That's really cool. Again, it's having that holistic approach. I don't know why I keep saying holistic, because that's, a biblical approach would be more appropriate. We had a brief conversation earlier, and, for those watching now, we're just coming off the back of our Shabbat gathering, and we were discussing, I was looking at the evangelical side to our faith. So a lot of our evangelical aspirations as believers can be very external. We're looking to go out and make new converts and bring people to the faith in varying different degrees, and praise God for that. However, if you look at the principle of evangelizing to your family, when I say evangelize, I don't mean like you're preaching the gospel at breakfast table, but, walking out the gospel, walking out the Torah within the family environment. If you look at it in terms of a retention of people within the faith, so I think, again, don't quote me on the statistic, but the amount of Christian children that come away from the faith when they hit their teen years is really quite high. And I believe that because the fullness of the scroll, the fullness of the Torah maybe isn't being taught and walked out by the parents. However, if you have a family that's cohesive in that, you're able to retain and have that love and that bonding within the family unit. So by default, the body grows, because if you look at many different branches of faith, so whether it's the Amish, whether it's the Hasidic, whether it's Muslims, they have a retention of the faith through their families, because the family unit is cohesive. So would you say that experience that you had, you were able to have that bond and have that foundation for that relationship, both for yourself in the Lord and together? Did that make like a big difference for you, do you think? Sorry, that was a really long way of saying having a biblical foundation to your home. Does that make a big difference for your relationship moving forward, would you say?
Yeah, I would say so, definitely. That scripture you quoted at the beginning about teaching a child the way he should go and he won't depart from it later. I think that's everything, because children are just like so impressionable, and all their first experiences are just shaping their view of the world and their understanding of what's right and what's wrong. And so I think definitely having been, I guess not everybody homeschooling is religious, but, in my personal experience with my mom, making sure that we had that time every day to focus on the word and pray and all that sort of thing, I think that definitely gave me a solid foundation in my faith, for sure.
I love that. What, just in terms of like your routine in the day, or what you're actually being taught? So was it the routine of say studying your Bible in the morning? Was it the routine that helped you as you grew up to stick to those principles?
Yeah, definitely, I would say so.
Okay, cool. Now, with that being said, would you say, or would you agree that homeschooling overall gives a better opportunity to maintain biblical principles within a family?
I would say so. Yeah, I believe so. As believers, we talk about the Shema a lot, and part of the Shema is that you speak of the word diligent, or teach the word diligently to your children, and speak of it when you walk and when you lie down and when you rise up and all that sort of thing. I butchered saying that.
No, I'm king of the paraphrase when it comes to scripture on here, so don't worry about that. That's fine.
I forget what the question was.
So we're saying about maintaining other biblical principles more advantageous within a homeschool environment. Is it easier to be more biblical with homeschooling?
Yeah, I would say so, because you're getting to choose. You have that freedom to choose your curriculum, and just where you want to allot your time. Like my mom made that time every day for the, reading the word and things. You're just not going to get that at the secular school, obviously.
Yeah.
So it's definitely easier to, maintain that lifestyle if you're just controlling how you spend your time with your kids.
And what would you say were again, these are probably questions you weren't too aware of at the time, but you may have had, could maybe look at hindsight. What do you think were the biggest challenges for your family in terms of homeschooling? And because obviously it sounds like it's amazing and the fruit's there, but was there any challenges? Was there anything that your mum struggled with or your dad struggled with that you can remember at all? Or
I think for my mom, she was really challenged with trying to homeschool all four of us, because we were different ages,
Right.
We were all a couple years apart, and so it was a lot for her to try to schedule a whole week of 4 different grade levels and try to help us all at different grade levels. I think that was definitely challenging. But yeah, I would say that was the biggest thing, was just keeping up with that. But homeschooling is also nice because
that's fine. No, I think that's amazing. The skill that it takes for somebody to do that, it's immense. I mean, if you take a typical class structure of 30 children all at once, and different backgrounds, different stories, different levels of ability, and for somebody who's trained in teaching to be able to do that is an amazing thing. So to do that in that context of, like you say, 4 children in that environment, to be able to do that, and your mum wasn't even wasn't trained to be a teacher. I think that's an incredible thing. Was there any what was Pop saying during this time? Was he in and around? Was he just going off to do work and then coming back in and checking in, or did he have any sort of input or say in this at all? From my perspective as potential father, what was his role in it?
Yeah, it was mainly my mom that did the homeschooling, because my dad was always working all the time. So, extremely thankful to him for, providing for us to be in that situation is huge, I think. So I'm forever grateful to him for all the hard work he put in for us to have that sort of upbringing. But sometimes on the subjects, he's real good with math and science and things like that. So occasionally we would come to him with questions. My mom would be like, ask your dad later. You know? So occasionally we would go to him for some help, but mainly my mom did the homeschooling.
Okay, cool. Were there any other sort of challenges or anything difficult that you remember from those days, or was it generally quite comfortable and an easy process for you?
For me, I was just really happy with homeschooling. I was happy with my siblings. I was comfortable with the work. You know, with homeschooling, you can kind of take more time on things that you're struggling with, which is great. You can take more time on things that are interesting to you. And so just being in that learning environment where you can really have that flexibility was just really comfortable learning. So I was happy with it. And, yeah.
Cool. You've mentioned a couple of times with regards to, you know, being identified to be able to you know, work to your strengths. And I think part of the issue that I have with the public school system is that it's systematic, and it's almost like designed to get from a child from A to B in terms of, right, you qualify for this, you get graded in that, and then you can go to this university, and then and no disrespect to that at all, because I think there is value and merit within that system, because not all systems are, you know, completely evil or whatever, but the thing that I think lacks within the school system that I've seen in the past 20 years is it's disingenuous to the individual's needs, skill set. So like I'm of a traditional mindset where if I see a child's good with his hands and my man can knock up a shelf, it's like, right, get in the workshop, get you hot on that, and we're going to turn you into like a master trade or whatever. Or it could be my man's really good with numbers. Okay, you can do the accounts or computing, or, you know, not to negate the validity of things that are on offer within the secular school, right. But a mother or a father who's spending time with their children day in, day out, surely can identify those skill sets and say, look, I really think you're going to be amazing at this. Let's focus on that and get you to where you want to be. Now, with that being said, getting to where you want to be, am I right in thinking that you're looking to getting into teaching yourself?
Yes.
Right, okay. So tell me more. How did that come about? Where did that aspiration come from? Is this a new thing, or is this what you found yourself kind of looking at?
Yeah, it's kind of ironic that I was homeschooled and never stepped foot in an elementary school, and now I'm an elementary school teacher. So yeah, I just how it came about was, I guess I had no idea what I wanted to do in college growing up, but when I was about 16, I had this, there was this little girl, a little like first grade girl at my fellowship. They had just joined, and me and her just like clicked, like so easy. And her mom just ended up bringing her to my house all the time, just leaving her with me. And I just loved spending time with her. And so the more time I spent with this little girl, I just enjoyed our conversations, and you know, I'd end up like kind of teaching her stuff just casually, you know. I liked asking her about school because she went to public school, and I just really enjoyed time with this little girl, and I just really clicked with her. So my mom suggested one day, she was like, hey, you could, you know, that's a job, you know, you could do that all the time. You could be an elementary teacher. And so I was like, wow, yeah, I could. That's an option. So even though I wasn't familiar with public school or anything like that at that point, I mean, it just appealed to me. I just enjoyed bonding with her, and I realized, yeah, I could do this all the time. And so a couple years later, I enrolled in my college for some education courses, and just got to work with kids going to public schools, and spend time actually tutoring them and working with them, and kind of familiarizing myself with an actual public school, because it was new to me, strangely enough.
What was your first impressions? How was that for you?
Oh, it was just, you know, it was just interesting that I felt kind of dumb, if I'm honest, because like everybody's gone to public elementary school, so there was just like the most basic things that I was unfamiliar with, about the functioning of a elementary school. So it was a lot to learn, but I really enjoyed working with the kids, and it just kind of confirmed it for me. So yeah, now I actually have a job for the coming school year. It'll be my first year as a public school teacher, so I'm excited for it.
That's amazing. And I think one of the facets that I love about that is that obviously we're prepped and we're trained to go out and to be salt in the earth and to be light into the world. Mm-hmm. And you've got that opportunity to go into the public sector, into the secular world where people may have no experience of God, they have no experience of Jesus, they have no experience of the Bible. And it's not necessarily a case where I'm sure you're going to be stood at the front of the class evangelizing, but the principle being that you can take, that light into ultimately potentially a dark environment is a really it just I think there's an old film called Dangerous Minds with Michelle Pfeiffer where she goes into like an inner city school and it's like full of like gangsters and she's just like ends up just ruling the roost. So not to worry that you'll be doing the same, but no, I think that's really cool that you could potentially be doing that, which I'm sure many of us are familiar with that scenario, going off into the working world, whatever our vocation, and walking the gospel out and walking out what it means to be a disciple of Jesus. So is that something you're at all aware of or carry, or is that just you just got your eyes on getting out there and learning your job?
No, it's definitely something on my mind because God willing, if I have children one day, I would personally like to homeschool because I see advantages in it and I enjoyed being homeschooled myself. So that is my plan for if I have children. But for myself right now, I think we definitely need good teachers. We need people there for the kids. I've considered like Christian schools and things like that to go teach for as well, but I think I just feel drawn to go to the public schools because, these kids, they're not all, I feel like in a Christian home, you have a pretty solid foundation just by the fact that you're surrounded by that kind of community. But in the public school, it's just anybody and everybody. And there's a lot of struggling kids in there. There's a lot of kids that, maybe they just are missing out on potentially missing out on people that are really there for them and listening to them and meeting their needs. And so my heart is just kind of there for those kids. And I think that's the main reason I wanted to be a teacher, is because I see that in these kids and I just want to be that person for them. And so, yeah.
That's beautiful. And is there anything that you've seen so far that's obviously that could potentially be contradictory to the faith, or anything you've had to sort of swallow and just get on with so far? Because obviously it's well documented in terms of programming and agendas that are prevalent within the school system, which we all know about. But is there anything that you've kind of seen already and you're a bit like, oh, crikey, here we go?
Yeah. The good thing about working with the public school is that it's welcoming to anybody and everybody. Yeah. And so I kind of have freedom to just believe how I want, although I can't share that with kids, obviously. I have to really close that off, which is difficult. I do foresee some challenges with the curriculum, because obviously in a public school they're not going to teach creation. It's a lot of evolution-based science and things like that. And so I do feel some pressures with that, but I think there's ways to avoid it.
Yeah.
So I'll do my best with that. And so definitely some challenges with that. but for the most part, I think it'll be fine.
It's really interesting when you get into, I think potentially, again, I'm just pointing to my own personal experience in terms of being in a, like a corporate environment. And you get those challenges where it could be an initiative, it could be a celebration, it could be any one of those things that we find within the world that are contradictory to the faith. It brings out, for me, I think it brings out a different side of the gospel. I think it brings out a different area in our faith in terms of how are we walking out the Torah? Like, how are we producing fruits without like articulating them? So it's like I could sit there with a friend or a colleague and say, well, this is Yeshua. He came and he died for your sins and da 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 da. And that's great. Like that's I would love to have that opportunity. But when your hands are tied in that environment, it's like, man, right. So what does that mean? I've got to be reliable. I've got to be trustworthy. I've got to be all of the fruits that you've got, have all of the characteristics of Yeshua without actually directly saying. Yeah. And then you're kind of sitting there patiently waiting for that invitation, whether it's like, a colleague who says, oh, do you want to go for some lunch? Or I've noticed that you don't work on a Saturday, and the questions start coming to you. So I think there's great hope in that. And is that something, again, that you've been aware of, or you'll just sort of find out as you go, like a different element to witnessing to people?
Yeah, I think at any time it's, our actions speak louder than words. So I think even though I'm in the public school and I can't voice those things about the gospel or about my beliefs or anything like that, I can definitely still walk things out. And for children, they just need to learn those basic principles of being kind to others and sharing and treating someone else as you would want to be treated, treating people with respect and things like that. So I think I can definitely walk that out and be a good example to kids, and they can enjoy the fruits of that and take on those kind of behaviors without me, preaching the gospel to them.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. Again, I guess the element for you is that you'll be working with younger children, so it's more about the actions than what you're telling them, because they're not going to be aware of the source of that morality, are they? But I think it's amazing that you can provide that, because Lord knows I would have experienced the same thing without realizing, whether it be a teacher or a mentor or somebody older than me within that system that was showing me love or showing me the compassion that I needed at that age. So I think that's amazing. Now, with respects to your experiences, again, because I don't know what your experiences being homeschooled, do you think it's going to affect or would there be anything that you experience within that environment that you'll take to teaching within schools?
I think something really important to me was the family time. And so I think when I'm working with my students, I want to make sure they have that when they go home. So not sending homework and things like that are going to take all their time when they go home. I just want to spend the time that I have with them when I've got them and send them home so that they can have that time with their family, because I think that's one of the main advantages that homeschooling has over public schooling, is just like how much time with family kids lose when they're going to public school and having things in the evening. I just want to free it up for them as much as possible.
And again, I think it's that actual desire of the fruits. There's the fruits of your loins, isn't it? It's like what you're investing into your family and what you're putting into your family, you're going to be reaping the fruit of that. So you have that desire to want to be like literally with your family, to be in close proximity with your loved ones. And unfortunately, within the world, those that don't have Messiah, and a lot that do actually find that kind of proximity to the family maybe a difficult thing to have. So I think it's amazing how your folks have cultivated that desire to be a unit and to be together. I think it's a beautiful thing. Amazing. So would you say that there is would you agree that there is an agenda within public school system to like maybe take them away from more godly principles? I know that's a generalization, but overall, like, would you feel hesitant to put your children in the public school system yourself?
I would. I think it's just a result of, like, since the USA, I'm speaking for the USA, you know.
The whole USA, yeah, by all means.
Since the USA, kind of says that it's based on the whole ideal of representing everyone and everything and promoting anything and everything, the public schools have to be that way too. Since they're funded by the government, they have to show that they're promoting anything and everything, and welcoming everybody. So I think naturally in a world where people, generally are not concerned with the ways of God or living in accordance with his word, naturally it's like, it's going to be a different environment than what you're wanting for your kids if you're trying to raise them in accordance with the word. So that being said, I don't think necessarily these teachers and these people in the public school have malicious intent against kids. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. I don't think they have malicious intent to like steer these kids wrong. It's just that from their perspective, they should be welcoming everything and everybody, and so anything goes basically. So I don't know, maybe there's not an agenda. I just think it's just naturally going to happen. Like, we're in the world, the public school is representing the whole world of anything. Right. And so you're just like, if the kid's in there, they're just going to hear everything and see everything. And you can't really put like a limit on that when it's supposed to represent the whole world. Does that make sense?
No, that makes perfect sense. And I think that's, in the Bible it says we wrestle not against flesh and blood, against principalities and spiritual wickedness in high places. Mm-hmm. So that level of construction of an agenda, as it were, it's beyond like human calculation. So if in a secular world those that don't have Messiah are under a form of deception, they are deceived, they don't have the truth, we can't hold them to the same standard if you do have the truth. So I think what you're saying there, it gives a great balance to those that go into these institutions with the right heart, the right intent. They've worked hard, they want to help, they want to educate. They may not go in necessarily thinking, well, I want to deceive all the children and take them to hell. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it doesn't work like that. So again, I think it's really important to have that balance of, right, yeah, surely there are some satanic things that are going on within the school system. But you could say that for any system within the world. But then how do we as believers then take an approach where we're actually, we're doing this out of love, we're doing this out of joy, we're doing this out of peace, we're doing this out of a biblical framework that the Lord's given us in order to train our children properly, to raise them in the way and to be light within the world. So I think that's a really important point you make there. Do you think that there's a possibility that there is an increase and an uptake of people homeschooling within the body? So, are there going to be more believers in this time? Maybe off the back of, like we said, a sort of negative reaction to bad things happening within the secular school system. Or if there's just a move of the Lord to say, look, I want you to be taking more of an ownership when it comes to your children. How many Christians at the moment are handing their children over to Babylon and then going, oh, I don't know why my child's not following why he's It's like, what you're expecting. But if we're living in accordance to the Torah, we're teaching and raising them in the correct way, and I'm not, there's no way is there a perfect formula. Like, I'm not even a parent myself, so I'm nowhere near qualified to speak on this in that sense. But is there do you think that there could potentially be more of a hands-on approach within the body in terms of homeschooling and taking ownership of education? Again, you're speaking for the whole of America, so don't worry.
I don't know like statistics or anything on it, so I feel like I can't really comment too much on it, but it wouldn't surprise me because, I actually really don't know.
No,
I don't feel like I can answer.
No,
that
this is why this is a really important conversation to have, because like, I'm new to this, you've experienced it, and I think we'd probably be representing a lot of different people within the body at this point in time. I've been in a quandary personally in terms of what would I like to do. Overall, I'd love to homeschool if I was given the opportunity to do so. I would prefer to homeschool my children, but at the same time, I respect an individual's decision to make whatever decision they want to make. I can see collectively overall that there is an increase of homeschooling for so many reasons. And what are our reasons as a believer? Is it because we're fearful? Is it because we're worried? Or is it because we're taking more of an ownership? So, yeah, like I said, I want to encourage people out there who are listening to take the responsibility to research this out. There's a massive history with regards to homeschooling. And again, I'm no expert and I've only touched on it slightly, but if you look in from the 60s onwards, a lot of the proponents for homeschooling, a lot of the trailblazers in terms of setting up the legislation and the law and the legalities of being able to do it, were secular, were atheists, had a different vision. But then the evangelical Christian side managed to kind of interweave in it. And that's why today it's so interweaved, the Christian and religious prerogative with the secular move of coming out of that system. So I think part of this conversation is great that we don't have all the answers. It's great that we don't have all the statistics, because I think we need to learn like what it takes and what we need to be preparing that. So yeah, don't by any stretch like worry that you haven't got all the answers. You know what I mean? Because I really don't.
I think there are some concerns that are growing for people. I know, like I said, I don't know a lot, but I remember reading an article a while back that one of the states was had like a new sex education, and it was for really, really young kids, and it was like really in depth and really graphic and just frankly really inappropriate. Like, not even sex education. It was almost porn on a page, and it was just like, the kids have no business reading that. Who wrote this? Like, what are they thinking putting this in a school? And so things like that, like, you just wouldn't have heard of that, 20 years ago being in a school. And so, I think there are some things that are going to start driving people away more and more if they keep up that sort of thing. But yeah, overall, I can't comment too much on it.
I mean, I probably could. I could probably. I mean, I think it's clear to say that there are, like you touched on with regards to sex education. There's a clear distortion going on in terms of. Let's just get into it. The science, biology, XY chromosomes, XX chromosomes, male, female. God's divine order, which was prevalent and was the foundation to the schooling system. So as a child, like, I was taught those things within biology. Yeah. As a child, we said a prayer before we ate our meal at lunchtime, and there was more of a biblical framework to even a secular system. Yeah. Praise God for that, because that was the only bit of God that I was receiving at that time. And again, if we get back into a modern context. Now, this is, and I'm just riffing here because this is just how I feel. If you look at the advent of technology, if we look at the age of information, if we look at the the explosion of, let's just say, sexual depravity, let's just say mental illness, access to excess, if we look at the distortion of basic human creation through the eyes of God, children are confused. They don't know if they're a boy or a girl. They don't know if they're coming or going. And a lot of this is not only being propagated, but it's being supported and facilitated by the school system. Yeah. And again, this isn't me like, I'm not having a go at individuals, but I'm saying when there's children involved, I can't. I think we've got a service to provide as believers. To again, this isn't about finger pointing. This is about we do what we do. Mm-hmm. We do it from a place of love because we're following Yah. And then if the outsiders see it, if the nations see that and recognize it and want to come to the truth, we're there, we're ready, we're waiting. Yeah. So that's. I'm just gonna get off my soapbox, but I think when you're talking about children, and obviously you're very passionate about children. I think it's despicable. I think it's disgusting. And I think what's happening, like you said, people will naturally turn away from it and ultimately come to God a bit more.
At that point, it does feel like a more social agenda than education. You know, when they take science that route, it's like it does make it feel like the school does have an agenda to just make kids think a certain way about society. And you know, those things you were talking about the X chromosome and Y chromosome, you know, obviously what we're talking about is sex education being opened up to transgender and you know, non-binary and all those sorts of like terms that are getting thrown around. It's like that's just not, it's not proper science to tell people that there's no gender and things like that. It's like there clearly is. And so when you're empowering schools to just give that sort of education to kids as fact, it's like it does feel more like a social agenda at that point. So it is concerning for parents who are believers.
Definitely. And again, do we want to be putting our children through the fire, you know, and expecting a result that's contrary to biblical belief? Again, the nations do what the nations do, but I think us as set apart, called out believers, we're on a different page. You know, you can look at the explosion of again. I didn't anticipate going into this area, but if we look at like big pharma, pharmaceuticals, mental health, the distribution of harmful products to children, they're targeting children and young adults with some really dangerous things, which we don't know what the results are going to be generationally. You know, it's a really scary. It's a scary time in terms of what we're going to see the result of in terms of this generation and what they're receiving. They've got access to excess, as I've said. They're being pumped full of chemicals and drugs. They're being pumped full of nonsense that's contradictory to creation and to science. And I think we might do we then have like a bit of a responsibility to say like to you know, just do what we do and say no, I can't sign, I can't co-sign this. This is actually madness. Like this is terrible.
I think we definitely do, as believing parents, have that responsibility, because like I was referring to the Shema earlier, it's like we're told to teach the word diligently to our children. Well, how is that possible if you're sending them to an institution every day where they're going to spend most of their time being taught not only not in accordance with the word of God, but directly against it? You know, how are you going to raise children that way, the way you want? So I think we do have a responsibility. And, you know, you also talked earlier about being light to the world, you know, salt of the earth, that sort of thing. I wouldn't go so far as to say you should just shelter your kids from the world entirely. You know, they need to know they're going to live their lives in the world. Like you can't protect them forever. So I think you do need to allow your family to be a light to the world, but we do, at the same time, we do have a responsibility with what we're letting our kids absorb for that much of their life, you know. Like kids are just sponges. They're just so impressionable, and you got to be careful what they are just absorbing all day, every day.
with that being said, you touched on about sheltering your children. Now, like you said, I would have the desire to raise my children in a certain way. But I think one of my concerns potentially is when a child has been protected and sheltered to the degree that if we go to the age of accountability where, you know, we can raise them in the way, but ultimately when we give our children to the Lord and they have to accept Yeshua as Messiah on their own account, to be baptized by the Holy Spirit, not because mummy and daddy have told them to. My fear is the prodigal principle. You know, if I shelter my child too much, or if I don't teach them correctly, are they just going to go mad off the rails, like when they get to a certain age? How do I find that balance as a potential parent? And I'm sure I'm speaking for other parents out there who are believers. Can you describe maybe a balance of, or what your experience was of, like, oh, okay, there's another world going on outside of what I've been taught and raised. So for me, it's like, I want to say to my children, right, this is what we believe, this is what we do, this is who we follow. This is what they believe, this is what goes on here, and I'm going to prepare you and I'm going to get you ready for what's going to take place in your adult life. Was that something that was a factor growing up for yourself at all, that your mum and dad were aware of? Yeah,
I mean, we would have discussions in the house. We would watch the news, and we would be out in the world doing things too. But yeah, we would have discussions about things going on in the outside world. So it's not like we were like completely sheltered to all these things. I think that is important to do with your kids because, like we said earlier, you can't just shelter them from all of it forever. I would say most of that happened once each of us went to. We each went to high school, public high school for a little bit, and then we all went to college. So mostly it was like getting out into education eventually. But before that, like as kids, we would definitely talk about things. So
yeah, it wasn't like, see, like in my little weird head, I've got this vision of like these sort of children tilling the soil and like playing with rocks and not seeing another soul for miles. Like that's just an insight into my weird head. But the reality is now, like you say, you've got a way in which you can prepare your children and get them ready for it. Because that's to be honest, that's one of my fears. Is like, man, like I'm still walking the walk with the Lord myself, and I'm learning, like, how can I then teach others and get them ready and prepared for, like I said before, this is a really interesting time in terms of the precipice that we sit on, not only as believers, but just in the world in general, in terms of the effect of all these things that we're saying. So, I think it's really important that we have these conversations to say, like, how are we going to deal with this? You know, this stuff isn't going anywhere. You know, it's probably going to get worse. Mm-hmm. But how, you know, we aren't to be fearful about this. We're to sort of take this opportunity and represent in the best way possible. With that, because I wouldn't mind focusing on, you know, what does it look like? What does it take in terms of having a good framework for homeschooling? So if you had any recommendations or encouragements, or how would you describe what it looks like? You know, you talking about you need to be financially stable. You know, is there a sort of way in which it works which be advantageous, do you think? So I'll give you an example. If we look at the average family that homeschools, and I think this is in the States, 70% of them are above the poverty line. Most of them are white, and most of them are comfortable. So for me, it's like there almost needs to be a degree of like functionality within the family environment for it to be successful. So in your experience, would you say that, you know, having your dad working, providing, having your mum doing what she does, like that's like a really important groundwork to what you wanted to do?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's tricky with the financial situation. Like we were obviously really blessed to be in that situation where my dad could work. He had plenty of work coming in, and it was enough for all 5 of the rest of us to be at home, just focusing on, my mom developing us and everything. I know not everybody can homeschool. It's just not an option for everybody. Sometimes both parents have to work, or if you're a single parent or whatnot, there's all kinds of different family situations. So yeah, it's a tricky one. I think there's still, I think even if you can't afford to have your kids homeschooled, there's still ways to have that family-centered life, even if your kids are going to public school. I think, you don't need to freak out and get scared like that your kids aren't going to be homeschooled. Like, it's fine. It's going to be fine. You just need to make sure you're prioritizing family time and you're prioritizing some time in the Word and prayer and setting that example to them. So, yeah.
I really like that. I really love that because I don't know whether it's symptomatic of the sort of Torah community where we have this fear of like, oh, if I send my child to school, they're going to come back wearing rainbow bracelets and doing all, you know what I mean? Like but I think from what you're saying, yeah, if we're doing the best that we can with what we have, then the Lord will reward that. I think is there a potential that like what your mum did was a massive leap of faith? Like she stepped out like in a big way, and the Lord wants us to prosper, to be fruitful, and to multiply, and to have families, and to do all that. So it for me, I could be wrong, but it sounds like your mum had a massive leap of faith, and so did your dad. And he sort of rewards that by being able to provide that framework, because I worry. I was like, oh, I can just about pay my bills and I can live, I can feed myself. But wow, like feeding a couple of people and doing all the rest of it, like it's quite a weighty matter. So I think what you said there's like really encouraging to those out there, whether it's a single parent or whatever. It's that's really cool. Yeah. Brilliant. I'm just trying to think where else I wanted to go with this. We've covered agendas. We've covered what else? We've covered what we would need in order to be successful in that area. Not being worried if you don't have the necessary credentials that you think you would need. What encouragement would you give to those that are looking to homeschool overall? Would you say? Like double thumbs up, go for it, have a good time, or is it something you'd recommend or cautionary? What do you reckon?
I think you don't need to feel pressure about not being an official teacher or feeling like you don't know what you're doing or where to start, or is it going to be too much? You know your child, you're going to know their needs. I think you'll fall into place with it. There's tons of materials online. Lots of people who blog about it. You can get on there and get different ideas. You can make friends with other homeschooling moms. It's like huge. So once you get your curriculum going, like it just kind of takes care of itself. You have something to follow. You're not just making something up every day. The materials will take care of it a lot for you. I wouldn't worry about not being an expert on it. I'd say just go for it. You'll figure it out along the way. There's a lot of people and a lot of materials to help you out, and it's going to be worth it. I think it's going to be worth it. Another nice thing about homeschooling is if you need a day to chill, if you need a day to catch up or get yourself together, like just take it. Like take a break and meet your needs. Get up and do it the next day. It'll be fine. But yeah.
And how do your siblings feel about it? Were they are they of a similar mindset to you? Is it something do you think they would carry on with and that they're grateful for and that they're happy that they did?
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely all my siblings and I would want to homeschool our children if we could do that.
and I said at the top, like how we establish, and this goes back to the podcast we did with Ollie, and we were talking about vision, and again, I'm sure you're experiencing this with Jackie, and we don't have to go too personal or anything, but that conversation that you have with a prospective spouse, it's like, how do you see like family life? How do you see marriage? How do you see the logistics of raising children? What's that going to look like? What's your vision, your hope, and your expectation for what that looks like? And again, you don't have to go into to any deep detail, but is that something you've had discussions with Jack in terms of like, oh, this is what I had and this is what I'd like to do, and he said, well, this is what has that been part of the conversation at all?
Yeah, we've discussed it a little bit. I think for myself, I definitely would like to homeschool, and he would like to. He was public schooled, obviously, so we had different experiences ourselves, but I think he's definitely in favor of it because we don't like what we see with the public school. So, especially with me being a qualified teacher at this point, it's like I feel confident with, if I had children, I feel confident about teaching my own kids. And so I'm sure that's kind of maybe that with me being a qualified teacher, it maybe makes him feel better about the idea.
Definitely a bit more confident.
But yeah, I think we've talked about it. Like if we could financially, that would be ideal. But of course, we'll see what happens.
This is another element in which I love. Now, we had the pleasure of attending Andy and Kat's wedding last week. Shout out Andy and Kat. Beautiful day. It was stunning. And as I'm looking around the venue, I'm seeing like different people's skills within the fellowship come to the fore to enable the day to happen. So we had the music covered, photography was covered, the ceremony was covered, and it was all in-house. Now, if you take that principle in terms of what I believe many churches and many fellowships try to build, is that community flexibility. Not only could we be looking potentially at raising our own children and teaching our own children, homeschooling, but can we facilitate like potentially a wider setup? And I'm not talking about like we're going to set up like a Torah school or whatever, but if there are certain skills within the fellowship, so my man's a doctor, or my man's a lawyer, my man's got teaching skills, I think there's a possibility where we can have it a bit more in-house. And I'm not talking about, cultish. I'm talking about like legitimate, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. Do you think that's a possibility in the future as well? Like,
yeah, sure. I mean, I know several people that have come together, not in a creepy way at all, come together to, even just among a few moms like that want to homeschool their kids, but they want to support each other. I've seen that situation where they'll kind of split up the subjects and even go to each other's houses and things like that, just make it work. It brings more of the social interaction for the kids too, which I think is great. But yeah, I've actually thought about this a lot. That one day I think that would actually be really, really cool. I'm not saying I'm going to do it for sure, but it's definitely crossed my mind about, setting up a situation where I could school other people's children if they don't want them in the system, but they don't feel confident about teaching them themselves. I think it would be really fun to sort of coordinate a little group to homeschool.
Yeah, I think fun being a byproduct, but I think actually massively essential could be another. When I think of the potential of, because learning's amazing, education's amazing, like it's a gift from God to be able to learn, to create, and to grow. So if we can actually take hold of these principles of science and maths and English, and we then have that biblical backdrop to how we're teaching our children, that's an amazing prospect. So again, we're already being shifted out of this kind of mindset of like evil, secular, satanic. It's like, no, we've just got this really good thing going on over here where we're able to teach children like really cool stuff in a really great way. And again, that's where like I just having this conversation, I can derive a lot of hope and a lot of excitement about, you know, people like yourself, and who knows, however, how many other men and women out there have that same aspiration. Who knows? Like, we could be on the cusp of, again, because I know I've been saying like we're on a precipice of sort of a lot of negative stuff. But what if we're on a massive like move of the Spirit to say like we're going to be raising some really incredible children in the Lord, like some amazing seeds are being sown, like for future generations, for the kingdom to expand and to receive Yeshua, which again, is that not like the ultimate goal of raising children, is to like further the gospel? Like that must be it. So I love that. I think that's the potential is incredible. And I, like yourself, I've seen a microcosm of that within the fellowship as well. Obviously, we got baby Jonah. Shout out baby Jonah. And Bex, when she, you know, first had him, and you could see like the women coming together and like, right, I'll take him here and then we'll have him here. And this coordination within the group, it was like, and I'm new to a church environment as well. So to see that in action was just like, that's so cool. That's so cool. And that doesn't mean to say that within the world, like they're devoid of that sort of thing, because, you know, it takes a community to raise a child, and I'm very well aware of that. But if we can have that biblical backdrop, that godly principle to how we're raising our children, man, like, that's something to get really excited about. So praise Yah to that. Brilliant. Anything to add to that at all? Or? No. Brilliant. So again, this is a conversation that this is gonna, I think, will go on in terms of the different perspectives that we and the challenges that we face as a body in terms of how we grip this subject. And again, like we don't have the answers, not all of the answers. So I think it's great to be having these conversations. I really would encourage those to have a research into the history of homeschooling, how we got to the point of where we are today, and see how we fit within that narrative. I think for the most part, like I just want to encourage people out there to have like a positive outlook in terms of the heart for why you would choose to do this. And I think it's been great to hear your side of the story in terms of what you experienced and how you were raised within that environment. And I still think it's mad how like you wouldn't have known any different. Like you just went straight into it, and I wouldn't have known any different either. Because growing up, the only children I knew that were homeschooled were those who were like learning difficulties. So you know, if you're dyslexic or you have behavioural difficulties, it was like you may be homeschooled, and that was considered like, wow, like that's a really mad thing to do. But now, as I feel I grow closer to the Word, and I get to understand more about the way Yah works, I think He's a God of choice, and He gives us the freedom to make decisions and the freedom to raise the children in the way that we see in the Scriptures. And you know, like I said, there's a lot of doom and gloom. There's a lot of bad narratives. There's vaccines. There's jabs. There's LGBT. All of that. I get it, but for the most part, it's like we need to be embracing what we have at our disposal. And I just hope and I pray that this could be an encouragement to anyone out there. Any final words? Any encouragement? Any final thoughts for anyone watching? No, that's about it. That's a wrap. Brilliant. So, again, thank you all for joining us. There's no way that we've covered everything. There's probably loads of things that I've missed. If there's anything that you've experienced yourself in terms of homeschooling and all of the tropes around it, any feedback, anything that we've discussed that you may think is right or wrong, any insights that you have, I genuinely welcome you to get on the comments. We read them, we go through them, and there will be future episodes on this subject. This is the first one. And so any insights, any areas that you feel that like we could look into, please let us know. In the meantime, this has been The Upper Room. Again, like, share, subscribe, do all that jazz. Really appreciate it. Thank you for all the feedback from the last podcast with Jackie. Some really touching comments. That was really cool. But yeah, from our house to yours, shalom. Thank you for being here. Thank you.